We got to get an update on Commonwealth v. Karen Reed from our official correspondent, Ted Daniel of Fox 25. Good morning, Ted.
Good morning, guys. Good morning from the media line. So if you hear any fights breaking out, that's the reason.
I got to tell you, I called this earlier the trial of the century for massholes, and I really, I mean, in your time, you've been doing news a long time. There's no trial that has the attention that this one has. Am I correct about that?
No, not the interest, just because, there's a lot of uncertainty with this trial, and with some of the other ones that I've covered, it's been pretty clear cut. So I think that's what's drawing so many people in.
Is it the biggest since was it Woodward, the nanny?
Oh, the English, the British nanny.
Because that was, I guess, international.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was huge. I think for me, it was probably the Hernandez trials.
Oh, right. Yes.
Those were, those had massive attention. You had the sports media covering that as well. But this one it's crazy town. Like, with just trying to get in, they only have so many spaces for the media. And people are putting chairs out 24 hours in advance, and there's been fights. The police have been called. So it's been an interesting ride.
Ted, what did you make of yesterday and Tristan and Julia Nagel in particular, and the way that they handled the defense? It was combative. It was weird.
It seemed a little bit. It seemed like they didn't want to play ball with the defense. I mean, obviously Julia Nagel had that big revelation yesterday that she said she saw a blob on the lawn near the flagpole. And the defense was super quick to point out that revelation didn't come out for 8 months. And the first time it came out was during an interview with State Trooper Michael Proctor, who the defense has, called conflicted and corrupt. So I thought it was strange that never came up prior to that first interview with the state police.
Curtis, you were questioning from Ted's perspective how he thinks the jury is responding so far to this. Can you tell it all, Ted?
Yeah, this jury's amazing. There's one guy in particular who comes in with a different color bow tie every day. They are so locked in. They all have notebooks. It's like a tennis match. They're ping-ponging their heads back and forth from the, defense and prosecution to the witness. And I have been thoroughly impressed by this jury. I've covered trials where you see some who are nodding off and don't appear to really be interested. These folks are locked in. And, I don't know what's going on in their heads, but at least by all appearances, they seem to be taking this very seriously.
Ted, from time to time, you hear the defense attorneys ask a question or bring something up that appears to have not been mentioned before. For instance, yesterday, there was a question about whether a witness could have heard somebody hit somebody else in the head with something. There was a question that was asked yesterday about the dog Chloe and whether or not the dog could have been removed from the home that evening. Are those things, you're there every day, is that the defense setting up what their case is going to be later for the jury?
Absolutely. I posted about that on X yesterday, that throughout the entire trial with each witness, and so far we're all on prosecution witnesses, the defense has been sprinkling little facts from or questions or from their third-party culpability theory. And remember that they're not allowed to come out in court and say, hey, she didn't do it because, this person, and this person did it. They can't say that. So, but they have been extremely thoughtful in the way that they've managed to get some of this stuff in, under the regulations that have been put forth with what they are technically allowed to say. Like, they can't say that all these people testified to a separate federal grand jury. So what they say is, did you speak to a grand jury where, Prosecutor Lally was not there? It wasn't a Commonwealth grand jury. They never come out and say, hey, it was a federal grand jury. But I have to think that the jury's kind of like, okay, obviously there was another sort of investigation or something going on with this case, because the defense keeps mentioning it over and over again.
Ted, I am just incredibly fascinated and equally confused. As I came late to the party, I've been cramming like I had to do in school, and I I just don't understand the prosecution at all. I don't get it. I don't understand the witnesses they've been calling, who all seem combative, uh, having really difficult long-term and short-term memory loss. And I don't know what the end game is. What are they building towards, and what do you think of the prosecution's work thus far?
Well, I think what they are trying to do now, remember that they've had 4 first responders on the stand who claim that Karen Reed made incriminating statements. So I think that was super important for the prosecution in the first, few days of the trial. I think, from what my understanding is, Prosecutor Lally is like, when it comes to car accident cases and motor vehicle homicide, like he's the guy. Like he's really good with data. He understands, how cars work and how crashes can take place. But obviously there's so many other extenuating factors in this trial that it's not just about that.
He's also very good at eliciting great detail on what the weather was like.
Yes. Yes. And we've heard all sorts of, we've heard snow on the ground, we've heard no snow on the ground, we've heard snow, and I get it. It's been a couple of years, and I don't know if I'd be able to remember, the exact weather on a certain date. Obviously, this was a huge date, but that's been kind of one of the inconsistencies.
The defense did a great job, though, especially when it comes to McLaughlin, who claims that she heard Karen Reed say that she hit him, to then point out the connection between she and Caitlin Albert. Did you feel like they landed that pretty well?
Yeah, so the defense wanted to go ahead and show the jury like all these pictures of Caitlin Albert and Caitlin McLaughlin through the years, like them in a hot tub. And, Aiden Carney has reported extensively on this. He had a number of these pictures, I think many months ago, and he got new ones. So they weren't ever actually able to display them on the screen, but they were able to show her in court. So the defense asked the judge after Caitlin McLaughlin testified, they said, "Hey, judge, we have these pictures. We want to accuse her of perjury in front of the jury." And the judge essentially says, well, I don't want you to go that far, but you are allowed to ask her questions about her relationship and how she knows Caitlin Albert. Because, when Caitlin McLaughlin was first asked what her relationship to Caitlin Albert was, I think the answer was somebody I went to high school with. And then you see all these pictures of them partying together through the years. And I don't know if that's how I would necessarily describe, someone who I knew at that level.
Ted, I'm unlike Curtis. I'm not even at the party, but I hear a lot of people talking and, about some of the evidence that's brought up. How can a prosecutor, based on what evidence is brought to their table, how can they even indict her, or how could they even charge her, like in this case, in the sense of take it to trial, when it sounds like it's just really kangaroo court on their part? How is this even possible? You've been around a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I think that, that they have text messages and voicemail messages that she left John O'Keefe that night saying she hated him. I think that's going to be a huge part. They say they have data from her car that shows she drove in reverse. So, there are a number of things that I could see why at the outset of this case that she would have been looked at as a suspect. But I also think that doesn't exclude all the other people who were never looked at as suspects.
Never. And many of them not interviewed for years afterwards.
Right.
I think they didn't interview Tristan Morris until testimony already started in the trial.
He was on the stand yesterday, drove his girlfriend home, and was not interviewed until May 7th when the trial was already underway. That's years later. It's
sloppy police work.
It makes you question. It certainly makes you question.
Ted, I think everybody's looking towards the Jen McCabe taking the stand, and Colin Albert. That seems where the two people that the defense keeps bringing up. When should we expect to see them?
That's a good question. So it seems to be right now they're going in order first of all, we heard from all the first responders, and then we're hearing from all the people inside the home. So I would expect them fairly soon. I'm sorry, you hear the siren in the background. And then you'll probably start hearing some of the technical experts, and we'll start getting into debates over Google searches and data from the phones and data from the cars.
What was the reaction in court, and I guess with the jury, when the defense was able to elicit yesterday the acknowledgement that Jen McCabe had requested a screenshot of the communication between Julie Nagel and her brother on her ride home, and why Jen McCabe might have needed that?
Well, I think the defense did a pretty good job of really making sure that the jury was aware that they thought that was unusual, because David Yannetti said something to like, the Jennifer McCabe, who is not an investigator in this case, requested that. I didn't see any outward reaction by the jury, but I thought the defense did a good job of trying to point out that was kind of odd. That why would she want the receipts from what they were talking about?
Yeah,
it's weird.
At this point, since you've been there, I think every single day, who has the favor, prosecution or defense so far?
I think it's going to be hard to convict on second-degree murder. I think that is going to be a tough battle to get to, and I think that even before we even got to trial, that second-degree murder was a pretty tough charge. They have no eyewitnesses that she hit him, right? It's all circumstantial evidence. So it all depends on, if the jury believes, some of these first responders and some of the people who are at the house, and whether or not maybe on the manslaughter charge, if they believe that maybe that she could have accidentally, hit him while she was drunk. But I mean, we'll have to see. You never know. They could totally surprise all of us, right? I mean, they don't have, like, my head is filled with facts from this case dating back for 2 years. They don't have necessarily all that knowledge. They're just seeing what they're seeing in court, and that's what they have to make their decision on. So, you don't know until you know what the outcome is.
Ted, the defense will have their time to present their case in their fashion when the prosecution rests. Is it their goal to show who did it, or just to say there is no way you can convict our client beyond a reasonable doubt? In other words, do they have to have any evidence of the gym or the basement or where they carried the body or any of that?
Yeah, no. So obviously the burden of proof is on the prosecution, so they just have to, put reasonable doubt. But, watching them throughout all this questioning, it's clear that they are trying to layer, the third-party culpability throughout everything that they're doing. So, they don't have to do that. I think that's their goal. I think these are really smart defense attorneys, and they're very smooth. And I think that by the end of this, they'll probably the jury will have a pretty good idea that the defense believes that, no, it was these people. It was in this basement. They were, that John O'Keefe was dragged out to the bulkhead and brought outside of the, to the flagpole. I think the jury will at least know where the defense has been going with this, essentially since the outset after her second-degree murder charge.
Did you get the feeling yesterday that any of those I did, but that any of those witnesses had perhaps flipped, as the expression goes?
Had what? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Had flipped and was and was talking when it comes to the federal investigation?
No, and my understanding is that nobody necessarily flipped. I don't believe so, and we did learn, that others who were on the, we didn't necessarily know had gone to the federal investigation actually had testified before the grand jury. So based on their testimony and what we heard yesterday, and kind of how they were not necessarily like pouring their hearts out to the defense, I don't think so. I think there's a pretty much a united front from, all the people who are in and around that house that night, and I don't think, that has really changed.
Okay, last one from me. Do you expect the prosecution to call Michael Proctor as a witness and Brian Higgins as a witness?
Yes, they're definitely on the list. I don't see how you don't call Proctor. He was the lead investigator on this case, and that seems to me to just be a massive red flag if the lead investigator on the case doesn't talk to the jury. Higgins as well. If we don't see them through the prosecution, we will certainly see them through the defense.
Ted, last one for me. It's from my buddy. Wants to know about the dog comments and what you think of those comments and why they were brought up.
Well, obviously the allegations are based on the autopsy photos that John O'Keefe had these injuries to his arm that the defense has suggested were from Chloe, the German Shepherd that was owned by the Alberts. And throughout the trial, we've heard that Chloe was rehomed after John O'Keefe was found dead on the Albert lawn, and that the Alberts say Chloe's now, I guess, on some farm in Vermont. But the defense has said, okay, we ask you for a record of that. Like, give us some sort of proof. And I guess that was never shared with the defense. And so I think that, so far we haven't heard anyone come out and say, the dog bit John O'Keefe, but I think the jury should be getting a good idea that is one of the allegations being made by the defense.
Ted, thank you as always, and we will stay in contact. You are our official correspondent when it comes to the trial. I hope you get in today. There's only 10 seats?
Yeah. I may. Hopefully, I had someone go up for me. Hopefully, I can get in, and if not, I'll just go to the media room, and I have a great view on the screens.
Wait, are you allowed to have somebody else wait in line for you? That doesn't seem like a true journalist.
The connection's getting bagged.
Right.
It's good to talk to you guys. We'll talk to you next week.
All right.
The seat's taken.
It's cutthroat there.
The seat is taken.
It's cutthroat.
Jeez.
All right.
Wiggy, we know that Dwight does not stand for that.